The India-Pakistan conflict is a complex and enduring issue with roots in the late colonial period. This five-part series delves into the historical events, key figures, and critical disputes that have shaped the relationship between these two nations from the era of British rule to the present day. Part 1. The Land Before Division. The story of the India-Pakistan conflict is not a short one. It is a long and complex tale stretching back into the fading years of the British Raj. To truly understand this conflict, we must first look at the land before it was divided. For millennia, the region that would become India and Pakistan was a land of diverse cultures, empires, and religions. The Indian subcontinent has been home to some of the world's oldest civilizations. The Indus Valley Civilization, which flourished around 2500 BCE, was one of the most advanced urban societies of its time. Its people developed sophisticated systems of sanitation, irrigation, and urban planning. This civilization, also known as the Harappan civilization, extended across what is today Pakistan and northwest India. Its major cities, such as Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, were centers of trade and craftsmanship. The decline of the Indus Valley Civilization around 1900 BC remains a subject of scholarly debate, with theories including climate change, shifts in river courses, and invasion. The arrival of the Indo-Aryans around 1500 BC marked a significant turning point in the history of the subcontinent. They brought with them the Sanskrit language, the Vedas, ancient Hindu scriptures, and a social structure that would evolve into the caste system. The Indo-Aryans migrated from Central Asia, and their arrival led to significant cultural and linguistic changes in the region. The Vedic period, named after the Vedas, laid the foundation for Hinduism and Indian society. Over the centuries, the subcontinent was ruled by a succession of powerful empires. The Mauryan Empire, founded by Chandragupta Maurya in 322 BCE, was one of the largest empires of its time. It unified much of the Indian subcontinent and promoted the spread of Buddhism. Chandragupta Maurya's empire stretched from modern-day Afghanistan to Bengal, and his reign was marked by efficient administration and a strong military. His grandson, Ashoka, converted to Buddhism after the bloody Kalinga War and promoted peace and tolerance. The Gupta Empire, which flourished from the 4th to the 6th centuries CE, is considered a golden age of Indian history. It was a time of great advancements in art, science, and literature. The Guptas made significant contributions to mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. The decimal system, the concept of zero, and advancements in Sanskrit literature are all attributed to this period. The arrival of Islam in the 7th century CE brought significant changes to the subcontinent. Muslim rulers established powerful sultanates and empires, such as the Delhi Sultanate and the Mughal Empire. The spread of Islam led to the development of new cultural traditions, architectural styles, and syncretic movements like Sufism. The Delhi Sultanate, which lasted from the 13th to the 16th centuries, saw the rule of various dynasties, including the Mamluks, the Khaljis, the Tughlaqs, the Sayyids, and the Lodhis. These sultanates played a crucial role in integrating Islamic culture into the Indian subcontinent. The Mughals, who ruled from the 16th to the 19th centuries, left a lasting legacy of art, architecture, and culture. The Mughal Empire was founded by Babur, a descendant of Timur and Genghis Khan, and reached its zenith under Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, and Aurangzeb. The Mughals were known for their administrative efficiency, their patronage of the arts, and their grand architectural projects such as the Taj Mahal, the Red Fort, and the Badshahi Mosque. The Mughal Empire, at its height, controlled nearly the entire Indian subcontinent. However, by the 18th century, the empire was in decline. This decline created a power vacuum that allowed the British East India Company to expand its influence. Factors contributing to the Mughal decline included internal conflicts, the rise of regional powers like the Marathas and the Sikhs, and economic problems. Part 2. The Company and the Crown. The British East India Company, a trading enterprise, began to exert its influence in the 17th century through a combination of trade, alliances, and military conquest. The company gradually expanded its control over much of the Indian subcontinent. The Battle of Plassey in 1757 is often cited as a key turning point, marking the beginning of the company's dominance in Bengal. The company's initial focus was on trade, but it soon became involved in local politics and military conflicts. The company's rule was driven by economic interests. They sought to control the lucrative trade in Indian goods such as textiles, spices, and raw materials. The company established trading posts and factories, and gradually expanded its territorial control. Key trading posts were established in Surat, Madras, Bombay, and Calcutta. The company's expansion was not always peaceful. They often clashed with local rulers and fought wars to protect their interests. The Battle of Buxar in 1764 further solidified the company's control over Bengal. This battle, fought against the combined forces of the Nawab of Bengal, the Nawab of Awadh, and the Mughal Emperor, established the company as a major political and military power in India. Over time, the British government gradually increased its control over the East India Company. The Regulating Act of 1773 and subsequent legislation sought to curb the company's excesses and make it more accountable to the British Crown. These acts aimed to reduce corruption and improve the administration of the company's territories. By the mid-19th century, the company's rule had evolved into that of the British Crown. The Indian Rebellion of 1857, also known as the Sepoy Mutiny, was a major turning point. The rebellion, sparked by a combination of grievances against British rule, was brutally suppressed. The immediate trigger was the introduction of new rifle cartridges greased with animal fat, which offended both Hindu and Muslim soldiers. In the aftermath of the rebellion, the British government took direct control of India, ending the rule of the East India Company. Queen Victoria was proclaimed Empress of India in 1876. This marked the beginning of the British Raj, a period of direct British rule over India. British rule brought about significant changes in India. The British built an extensive network of railways, roads, and canals, which helped to modernize the country and facilitate trade. They also introduced Western education, which led to the emergence of a new class of educated Indians. The impact of British infrastructure development is still visible today. However, British rule was also marked by economic exploitation and racial discrimination. Indian resources were often used to benefit the British economy, and Indians were frequently denied positions of power and authority. The economic policies of the British, such as the imposition of heavy taxes and the destruction of local industries, led to widespread poverty and resentment. Part 3. The Rise of Nationalism. As the 19th century progressed, a growing sense of Indian nationalism began to emerge. Educated Indians, exposed to Western ideas of democracy and self-determination, began to demand a greater role in their own governance. The seeds of nationalism were sown by social and religious reform movements like the Brahmo Samaj and the Arya Samaj. Organizations like the Indian National Congress, founded in 1885, played a crucial role in articulating these demands and mobilizing popular support. The early leaders of the Congress, such as Dadabhai Naoroji and Chandranath Banerjee, advocated for greater autonomy within the British Empire. The Congress initially focused on moderate reforms but gradually adopted a more radical stance. The partition of Bengal in 1905 by Lord Curzon fueled further nationalist sentiment. The partition, which divided the province into East Bengal and West Bengal, was seen by many Indians as a deliberate attempt to divide and rule. It sparked widespread protests and galvanized the nationalist movement. The Swadeshi movement, which emerged in response to the partition of Bengal, advocated for the boycott of British goods and the promotion of India-made products. This movement marked a significant turning point in the Indian independence struggle. It promoted self-reliance and economic nationalism. Mahatma Gandhi, the lawyer who had returned from South Africa, emerged as a leader of the independence movement in the early 20th century. Gandhi advocated for nonviolent resistance, using methods like civil disobedience and satyagraha to challenge British rule. His philosophy of satyagraha, or truth force, became the guiding principle of the Indian independence movement. Gandhi's philosophy and tactics inspired millions and made him a global icon. His leadership transformed the Indian National Congress into a mass movement, mobilizing people from all walks of life. He united diverse groups, including Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, and others, in the struggle for independence. However, the Indian independence movement was not monolithic. While the Congress advocated for a united, secular India, a separate movement emerged among some Muslims who feared being marginalized in a Hindu-majority nation. This fear was exacerbated by the perceived Hindu bias of some Congress leaders. Part 4: The Muslim League and the Demand for Pakistan. The All India Muslim League, founded in 1906, became the primary voice for the separate movement among some Muslims. The League initially sought to protect the rights of Muslims within a united India. It was formed in response to the perceived inadequacies of the Indian National Congress in representing Muslim interests. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, a lawyer who initially supported Hindu-Muslim unity, gradually became convinced that Muslims needed their own state to protect their interests. He argued that Muslims were a distinct nation with their own culture, history, and destiny. Jinnah's political ideology evolved over time, leading him to champion the cause of a separate Muslim state. Jinnah's leadership and unwavering advocacy for a separate Muslim state would ultimately lead to the creation of Pakistan. The League's demand for a separate state gained momentum in the 1930s and 1940s. The failure of the Congress to address Muslim concerns and the increasing communal polarization contributed to this demand. The Lahore Resolution, passed by the Muslim League in 1940, formally demanded the creation of a separate state for Muslims. This resolution marked a major turning point in the history of the Indian independence movement. It articulated the two-nation theory, which posited that Hindus and Muslims were distinct nations and could not coexist in a single state. The British government, facing growing pressure from Indian nationalists and weakened by the Second World War, began to consider the possibility of granting independence. However, the question of whether India would be one nation or two remained a major point of contention. The war had strained Britain's resources and made it increasingly difficult for them to maintain control over their colonies. The Second World War further complicated the situation. While many Indians supported the Allied cause, others were opposed to fighting for the British Empire. The war also strained Britain's resources and weakened its ability to maintain control over its vast empire. The war effort diverted British attention and resources away from India, accelerating the process of decolonization. As the war drew to a close, it became clear that the days of the British Raj were numbered. The British government, under Prime Minister Clement Attlee, began to make plans for the transfer of power. However, the question of partition remained unresolved. The Labour Party, which came to power in Britain after the war, was committed to granting independence to India. Part 5: The Road to Partition. The 1930s and 1940s were a time of increasing political turmoil in India. The British, facing growing pressure from Indian nationalists and weakened by the Second World War, began to consider the possibility of granting independence. However, the question of whether India would be one nation or two remained a major point of contention. The political landscape was further complicated by the rise of various political parties and movements with differing visions for India's future. The Muslim League, under Jinnah's leadership, gained increasing support among Muslims, particularly in provinces where they were in the majority. The League's demand for a separate state, to be called Pakistan, became more insistent. The League's influence grew significantly during this period, especially in provinces like Punjab, Sindh, and Bengal. The Congress, while committed to a united India, found it increasingly difficult to reconcile its vision with the League's demands. The Cript Mission in 1942, an attempt by the British government to secure Indian support for the war effort, failed to resolve the issue of partition. The mission, led by Sir Stafford Cripps, offered India dominion status after the war but failed to address the fundamental issue of Hindu-Muslim unity. The Quit India movement, launched by Gandhi in 1942, further intensified the pressure on the British to grant independence. The movement, which called for the immediate withdrawal of the British from India, was met with widespread arrests and suppression. Despite the suppression, the movement demonstrated the strength of Indian nationalism and the determination to achieve independence. The end of the Second World War in 1945 marked a turning point. The new Labour government in Britain, led by Clement Attlee, was committed to granting independence to India. However, the question of how this would be achieved remained a major challenge. The post-war period saw intense negotiations and political maneuvering among the British, the Congress, and the Muslim League. The Cabinet Mission Plan in 1946 was another attempt to find a solution that would preserve a united India. The plan proposed a three-tiered structure with a weak central government and strong provincial autonomy. However, this plan was ultimately rejected by both the Congress and the Muslim League. The plan's failure highlighted the deep divisions between the two major political parties. The Direct Action Day, called by the Muslim League on the 16th of August, 1946, led to widespread communal violence, particularly in Calcutta. This violence further hardened the positions of the two sides and made partition seem increasingly inevitable. The day of protest turned into a week of horrific rioting, marking a turning point in the deteriorating relationship between Hindus and Muslims. Part 6: The Trauma of Partition. In 1947, the British government announced its decision to partition India into two independent nations, India and Pakistan. The partition, which came into effect on the 15th of August 1947, was a momentous event in the history of the subcontinent. It marked the end of British rule and the birth of two new nations. The decision to partition British India into the two independent nations of India and Pakistan was intended to resolve the growing tensions between Hindus and Muslims and pave the way for a peaceful transfer of power. However, the reality of partition was far from peaceful. It unleashed a torrent of violence, displacement, and human suffering that would leave an indelible scar on the subcontinent. The partition was accompanied by one of the largest mass migrations in human history. The process of partition was incredibly rushed. The British government, eager to extricate itself from India, gave Sir Cyril Ratcliffe, a British lawyer with little knowledge of the region, the daunting task of drawing the boundary between the two new nations. Radcliffe's line divided not only the land but also communities, families, and lives. The Radcliffe Line, as it came to be known, was drawn in a matter of weeks based on outdated maps and incomplete information. The consequences of this hasty and ill-conceived partition were catastrophic. The speed and lack of preparation for the partition exacerbated the violence and suffering. Millions of people found themselves on the wrong side of the newly drawn border. Hindus and Sikhs in what became Pakistan and Muslims in what became India suddenly became minorities in hostile territory. This sudden shift in identity and status led to widespread fear and insecurity. A mass exodus began as millions of people set out to cross the newly created border. Refugees traveled by train, by foot, and by any means they could find. The journey was fraught with peril as trains carrying refugees were attacked and their passengers massacred. These refugee trains became symbols of the brutality and chaos of partition. Violence erupted on a massive scale. Communal riots broke out in cities and villages across the subcontinent. The scale of the violence was staggering, with estimates of the death toll ranging from hundreds of thousands to millions. The violence was fueled by religious hatred, fear, and a breakdown of law and order. The newly formed governments of India and Pakistan were ill-prepared to deal with the magnitude of the crisis. They lacked the resources and the infrastructure to provide adequate shelter, food, and security for the millions of refugees. The administrative machinery of both nations was overwhelmed by the scale of the humanitarian crisis. Part 7: The Aftermath of Partition. The partition of India and Pakistan was a tragedy of immense proportions. It was a time of unprecedented violence, displacement, and human suffering. It left a lasting legacy of pain and division that continues to haunt the subcontinent to this day. The human cost of partition is difficult to fully comprehend, with the loss of life, the trauma of displacement, and the long-term social and psychological effects. The events of 1947 serve as a stark reminder of the dangers of religious intolerance and the importance of peaceful coexistence. The trauma of partition also laid the groundwork for the conflicts that would plague the relationship between India and Pakistan in the decades to come. The legacy of partition continues to shape the political discourse and social fabric of both nations. The unresolved issues of partition, particularly the dispute over Kashmir, would become a major source of tension and conflict between the two newly independent nations. The partition also had a profound impact on the social and political landscape of the subcontinent. The Radcliffe Line, intended to be a temporary boundary, hardened into a permanent division, leading to ongoing territorial disputes. It exacerbated existing tensions between Hindus and Muslims, creating a legacy of mistrust and animosity that would persist for decades. It also led to the creation of two nations with very different identities and trajectories. The partition not only divided the land but also divided communities, creating a deep sense of loss and displacement. India, under the leadership of Jawaharlal Nehru, embraced a secular, democratic, and socialist vision. It sought to build a modern, industrialized nation that would be inclusive of all its diverse communities. Nehru's vision of a secular India aimed to unite the country's diverse population under a common national identity. Pakistan, under the leadership of Muhammad Ali Jinnah and later Liaquat Ali Khan, defined itself as an Islamic republic. It sought to create a nation where Muslims could live according to their faith and traditions. Pakistan's identity was rooted in the idea of providing a homeland for the Muslims of the subcontinent. The early years of independence were marked by political instability and economic challenges for both India and Pakistan. The two nations also faced the daunting task of building their own institutions and establishing their place in the world. Both countries struggled with the challenges of nation building, including creating a stable political system, developing a robust economy, and addressing the needs of millions of refugees. The relationship between India and Pakistan was further complicated by the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi in 1948. Gandhi's assassination by a Hindu nationalist highlighted the deep communal divisions that still existed in India. It was a stark reminder that the wounds of partition were still fresh and that the ideals of tolerance and coexistence were still fragile. Part 8. The Kashmir Conundrum. The princely state of Jammu and Kashmir, nestled in the Himalayas, became a flashpoint immediately following the partition of India and Pakistan. Its strategic location, diverse population, and the ambivalent stance of its ruler, Maharaja Hari Singh, made it a bone of contention between the two newly formed nations. The Kashmir dispute has become one of the world's longest-running and most intractable conflicts. At the time of partition, the British granted the princely states the option to accede to either India or Pakistan, or to remain independent. Kashmir, with its Muslim-majority population and Hindu ruler, faced a complex dilemma. The Maharaja's indecision and the state's unique demographic composition made it a natural flashpoint. Maharaja Hari Singh initially desired to maintain Kashmir's independence. However, in October 1947, tribal militias from Pakistan invaded Kashmir. Facing imminent defeat, Maharaja Hari Singh appealed to India for military assistance. The tribal invasion, supported by Pakistan, aimed to force Kashmir to accede to Pakistan. India agreed to help, but on the condition that Kashmir accede to India. On the 26th of October 1947, Maharaja Hari Singh signed the Instrument of Accession, formally joining Kashmir to India. The legality and validity of this accession have been contested by Pakistan ever since. India's intervention in Kashmir marked the beginning of the First Indo-Pakistani War. The war ended with a UN-mediated ceasefire, leaving Kashmir divided by a line of control low C. The ceasefire line, intended to be temporary, became a de facto border, dividing families and communities. The United Nations Security Council passed several resolutions calling for a plebiscite in Kashmir to allow the Kashmiri people to determine their own future. However, this plebiscite has never been held. Disagreements over the conditions for the plebiscite, including the withdrawal of troops and the administration of the vote, have prevented its implementation. The Kashmir dispute has remained unresolved for over 7 decades, fueling tensions and conflicts between India and Pakistan. It has been the primary cause of two subsequent wars between the two nations in 1965 and 1999, and it continues to be a major obstacle to peace and stability in the region. The dispute has evolved over time, incorporating issues of self-determination, human rights, and cross-border terrorism. The people of Kashmir have been caught in the middle of this protracted conflict. They have suffered violence, displacement, and human rights abuses. The insurgency in Kashmir, which began in the late 1980s, has further complicated the situation. The insurgency has led to a complex and multifaceted conflict with various actors, including militants, security forces, and civilians, each with their own narratives and grievances. India has accused Pakistan of supporting cross-border terrorism, providing training, arms, and funding to militant groups operating in Kashmir. Pakistan denies these charges, but the issue of cross-border terrorism has become a major sticking point in the relationship between the two countries. The involvement of external actors has further complicated the resolution of the Kashmir dispute. Part 9: Wars and Standoffs. The unresolved Kashmir dispute, along with other political and strategic factors, has led India and Pakistan to engage in several wars and military standoffs since their independence in 1947. These conflicts have had far-reaching consequences, shaping the political landscape and the relationship between the two nations. The second major conflict between India and Pakistan occurred in 1965. Tensions had been simmering for some time, fueled by continued disputes over Kashmir and border skirmishes. The war ended in a stalemate after international intervention. The Tashkent Declaration, signed after the war, attempted to restore peace but failed to address the underlying issues. The third major conflict between India and Pakistan took place in 1971. This war was unique in that it was not directly related to the Kashmir dispute. Instead, it stemmed from the political turmoil in East Pakistan, now Bangladesh. The war led to the creation of the independent nation of Bangladesh. India's decisive victory in this war significantly altered the balance of power in South Asia. In addition to these major wars, India and Pakistan have also engaged in numerous smaller conflicts, skirmishes, and border standoffs. The Siachen Glacier, a high-altitude region in the Karakoram Range, became a site of prolonged and costly conflict in the 1980s and 1990s. The harsh terrain and extreme weather conditions made this conflict particularly challenging. The Kargil War in 1999 was another significant conflict between India and Pakistan. Pakistani soldiers and Kashmiri militants infiltrated Indian-administered Kashmir, occupying strategic high-altitude positions in the Kargil region. India eventually regained control of the occupied territories, but the conflict further strained relations between the two countries. The Kargil War demonstrated the continued volatility of the Kashmir dispute and the willingness of both sides to use military force. The late 20th century also saw both India and Pakistan develop nuclear weapons. India conducted its first nuclear test in 1974, while Pakistan followed suit in 1998. This nuclearization of the subcontinent added a dangerous new dimension to the rivalry between the two countries. The possession of nuclear weapons has introduced a new level of deterrence and risk in the India-Pakistan conflict. Part 10: A Troubled Legacy, an Uncertain Future. The legacy of the India-Pakistan conflict is a complex and deeply troubling one. The 70+ years of strife have left an indelible mark on the subcontinent, shaping the political landscape, fueling national identities, and consuming vast resources. The conflict has had a profound impact on the social, economic, and political development of both nations. The most enduring and intractable issue remains the dispute over Kashmir. Cross-border terrorism has become another major complicating factor in the relationship between India and Pakistan. These two issues continue to be major obstacles to any lasting peace between the two countries. The nuclearization of India and Pakistan in the late 20th century has added a dangerous new dimension to their rivalry. Despite the long history of conflict, there have been periods of dialogue and attempts at peace between India and Pakistan. These efforts, however, have often been derailed by political events and renewed tensions. The conflict between India and Pakistan has had a profound impact on the lives of millions of people. It has fueled nationalism on both sides, shaping political discourse and public opinion. The conflict has also diverted resources away from critical areas such as education, healthcare, and economic development. The international community has long been concerned about the potential for further conflict between India and Pakistan. The future of the relationship between India and Pakistan remains uncertain. The involvement of external powers, such as the United States and China, adds another layer of complexity to the situation. There are many obstacles to peace, including the unresolved Kashmir dispute, cross-border terrorism, and deep-seated mistrust. However, there are also reasons for hope. There are many people on both sides of the border who desire peace and reconciliation. People-to-people initiatives, cultural exchanges, and trade relations offer some hope for future cooperation. The path to lasting peace between India and Pakistan will be long and difficult. It will require courage, vision, and a willingness to compromise on both sides. Ultimately, the future of India and Pakistan will depend on the choices made by their leaders and their people. The decisions made in the coming years will have a profound impact on the lives of millions and the stability of the entire region.